Good evening to this packed house here on the March 6th, 2024 Advisory and Finance Committee meeting of the Town of Plymouth in the Great Hall of Town Hall. Welcome to everybody here, and I will go right to the roll call to check us in. So, Ms. Butler, I see you.
I am here.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cabana?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Howard?
Here.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Lally?
He's going to be 10 minutes late, he said.
I did get that. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll check him in soon. Mr. Lawler?
Present.
Mr. Pizarro?
Here.
Ms. Tompkins?
Here.
Ms. Richards said she would not be able to make it, so I'll mark her absent. Okay. Mr. Wright?
Here.
And Mr. Young? And Ms. Zaro Abraham?
Here.
And Mr. Zuccaroli?
Here.
Excellent, thank you. So we're all checked in, and now our public service announcement. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format. As you can see, some of us are here physically, and some are attending electronically through a number of different hybrid formats. You can view this on Comcast 9, Verizon 47, or on PAC TV's YouTube channel, which can be viewed at pactv.org/stream. Our ground rules in this committee are any speaker giving public comment is allotted up to 5 minutes in which to speak. Public comment can be made at the beginning or the end of our meeting or in regard to a particular agenda item that the speaker wishes to be heard. Anyone who would like to attend our meeting virtually, including members of the public who wish to give public comment, can use any of the number of methods to join us. They can download the Zoom app and use meeting code 995-2986-0638, and our passcode is 100131. You can also go to www.zoom.us and use the same code 995-2986-0638, meeting passcode 100131. Or you can just call in to 929-205-6099. That's 929-205-6099, and enter meeting code 995-2986-0638, meeting passcode 100131. We will not be able to see your bright and smiley face, but we can hear you and will call on you if you so desire. So, any questions so far? All right. Excellent. We have a fairly short agenda today, so we should be able to get through this and have everybody on their way. And we're going to start with agenda items. We have two of them today on the special. We have Article 11 and Article 12, and we're going to start in numerical order. With Article 11, we are looking at adopting a new loitering bylaw, and I'll give some credit to Mr. Dunn. Yeah. Is there a public comment? I'm sorry, before we start. No. Oh, are you raising your hand? Go ahead.
Yes.
Please.
May I speak?
Yes, you may. Can you identify yourself and your address?
I'm Lori Downs, 22 Winterberry Way. I'm speaking ahead to Article 12. Good evening. I'm also a Precinct 17 member, and I want to make it clear I am not speaking for my precinct. I am speaking for myself. I wish to offer some insight to the Article 12, the proposal for the two liquor licenses for Precinct 17 and 9. According to Mr. Bletzer, it has been mentioned to him that our precincts 9 and 17 are underserved. He also spoke to the importance that additional liquor stores not compete with established liquor stores. And he felt that liquor stores in our precinct were far enough away so as not to compete. I understand the need for economic development and liquor sales, especially when a package store can establish a symbiotic relationship, such as the one at Pine Hills, which is next to the market. Liquor stores in the correct location can be an economic driver, especially to nearby establishments. So to speak to that, I live in Red Brook, and I've been musing over what benefits a liquor store could bring to Red Brook and the surrounding area. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing the benefit to any surrounding businesses other than to the liquor store itself. I am not convinced, I lost my page section, hang on. Okay, I am not convinced that a liquor store in Red Brook is not going to compete with the Pine Hills liquor store or the Sandy Pond Campground store, which sells beer and wine, or the liquor stores in Cedarville. I patronize the Pine Hill store for liquor, beer, and wine, and sometimes the Sandy Pond store for beer and wine coolers, as does many of my neighbors. And some of my other neighbors speak to patronizing their Cedarville stores. If a liquor store is established in Red Brook, I fear that those stores will lose our business as we shift to patronizing our own neighborhood store. In fact, the liquor store in Red Brook could draw customers away from the Black Lantern Tavern and possibly the Bistro, which also serve beer, wine, and mixed drinks. These restaurants are located in the center of Red Brook, if you're not familiar with the area. And perhaps it could also affect the local bakery and cafe should that proprietor in the future decide to offer beer and wine and perhaps special coffee drinks. I want our established restaurants and coffee shops in Red Brook to survive and to thrive. It is my opinion that a liquor store in Red Brook will indeed compete with the established liquor stores in the surrounding area and also these nearby restaurants. Also, the liquor stores that I mentioned are less than 15 minutes away. Some of them as little as 12 minutes away. Driving less than 15 minutes, it's not a big deal. Plus, we tend to bundle our errands, so it's not a huge inconvenience. So really, those of us living in Red Brook in the vicinity, I don't believe that we're underserved. Now, one might say that the folks that live further southwest in the Buttermilk area, Bay, that's part of Precinct 17, may be underserved. But they are only a few minutes away from 7-Eleven in Wareham, so I doubt they'll trek all the way up to Red Brook for their liquor, unless, of course, they are seeking nips, which are not available anymore at 7-Eleven because Wareham has banned nips. And speaking of nips, let me share the feelings of a constituent who lives on Wareham Road. This is from Kristen Elaine. She wrote to me, honestly, I'm good with not having nips from 7-Eleven thrown in my front yard from the idiots flying by my house on Wareham Road. Don't invite the problem to return. Myself, I just can't understand the logic of devoting town resources to push this home rule through state legislation when no business has asked for this license, and I'm not seeing an overwhelming demand from the residents, unless it's Precinct 9 that's demanding these licenses. I look forward to hearing your input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Downs, for your comment, and we will certainly take that into consideration when we discuss Article 12. Are there any other members of the public on the Zoom that would like to speak? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We will go to Article 11, adopt new loitering bylaw, to see if the town will vote to amend the town bylaws to adopt a new bylaw entitled loitering as follows. And I'll just read the two sections here so everybody's on the same page. Section 1, no persons shall stay on a street, sidewalk, or parking lot with the intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly create a risk of public inconvenience, annoyance, or harm. However, this section shall not be construed or used to curtail, abridge, or limit the right of any person to exercise the right of peaceful persuasion guaranteed by Chapter 149, Section 24 of the Massachusetts General Laws, or to curtail, abridge, or limit the intent of any statute of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And Section 2, violators of this bylaw shall be subject to a fine of $50 per violation for a first-time offense. A second violation shall be punished by a fine of $100. Third and subsequent violations shall be subject to a $150 fine. or take any action relative thereto. And I'm going to turn this floor over to our police chief, Dana Flynn.
Thank you. As stated, I'm Dana Flynn, Chief of Police for the town of Plymouth. You've read the language of the bylaw that was approved by the Board of Selectmen last week. I prepared a memo that each member of the committee should have received, and I'll touch on just a couple of fine points of the memo, just so you understand how we got to this point. We get numerous complaints from residents who live in the downtown and surrounding areas that abut certain parking lots in the parking garage regarding some behavior that isn't conducive to the design of what these areas are for. It's parking. These have become gathering places of young people and others who gather, make noise, play their music, rev their engines and whatnot. So definitely affecting the quality of life of our residents. As stated in my memo, I brought up before, we do have statutes in the general law that we can use to address these issues, but it's usually, we have to wait until either we get a call for service, we have a witness to these incidents that allow us to prosecute these people. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to nip the problem in the bud before it gets to that point. We want to address the disturbances or the annoyances to our residents before they get to the level we really have to take criminal action against these people. Further, when we came up with this bylaw, the point was brought up that we have some similar bylaws already in place that pertain to our parks and beaches where we have our time limits placed on these locations already. And the purpose behind those bylaws is to ensure these locations are used for their intended purposes. And these bylaws allow us, if we see somebody within these locations after the hours, we can go in and ask them to leave and remove those people before it becomes a problem, before we have to take higher level of police action or any damage in those locations occur. So what this bylaw will allow us to do is if we see these groups starting to gather in these locations and not using the locations for their intended purposes, it'll allow us to go up and engage them in conversation and ask them to leave. Simple as that. It'll give us firm ground to ask these people to leave the location, and if they do not leave, it'll allow us to bring it up to the next level and perhaps write them a town bylaw citation for $50. This way we don't have to wait for the residents to call. We don't have to wait till the incident or the disturbance gets out of hand before we respond. We have to take a lot higher level of action.
Okay, excellent. So it sounds proactive versus reactive.
That's exactly what it is. It allows us to proactively take action.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. Do we have any questions for Chief Flynn? No? Excellent. Motion? Mr. Dunn has moved to approve Article 11, and I just wanted to give Mr. Dunn a little bit of credit for kind of doing some of the work, the background work, spending time on this.
So I'd like to make a motion to recommend my amended version that I sent to everyone, which do I have to read that? Or, okay, which I want to change it to, so I'm going to make a motion to recommend that town meeting approve a bylaw that says, no person shall stay in a parking lot between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. with the intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly create a risk of public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm. However, this section shall not be construed or used to curtail, abridge, or limit the right of any person to exercise the right of peaceful persuasion guaranteed by Chapter 149, Section 24 of the Massachusetts General Laws, or to curtail, abridge, or limit the intent of any statute of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Violators of this bylaw may be subject to a fine of $50 per violation for a first-time offense. A second violation shall be punished by a fine of $100. Third and subsequent violations shall be subject to a $150 fine.
Okay, and can you just give us the differences in your version versus the differences that we're looking at
So-
with Chief Flynn's version?
So I'm removing street and sidewalks and only including parking areas and adding in hours between 8 PM and 6 AM. And then on the bottom section where this would allow the police department to decide against issuing a fine, and they could issue a warning if they so chose, instead of a fine for the first time.
So the last part of the amendment would give the officer discretion to ask the person to leave before getting right to the citation. We've worked closely with Park Plymouth on this. Our big thing is we want to give people who use these areas ample notice. So they've agreed to put signage for us, if approved, that'll spell out as much of the bylaw here as possible. So there's no question whatsoever what the intended use of these locations are.
Okay, does the committee have any questions for Mr. Dunn and his changes?
I have a question. Sir?
Mr.
so
Young.
What do you feel about those changes? Because I think I'm just looking at the Word document that was
Sure.
sent us after the fact, where the cross-out was street and sidewalk.
Sure.
And now, so I think I'm in concurrence with where you're going with it.
Right.
I think when you cross that out, it probably opens up a little bit of brevity to what can happen if you don't have those elements in there. I'm not just looking for your opinion on that.
Right, so when the bylaw was first written, when I worked with Attorney McKay, one thing we need to understand is, even if you vote to support this bylaw and it gets passed in town meeting, it still has to go to the Attorney General's office and pass muster for constitutionality reasons. The language that we used in the original version of this was taken from other communities that Attorney McKay was able to meld together that had already received such approval. So, again, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel, and we're looking to stay within the constitutional boundaries and, protect the freedoms that every one of us still enjoy. And that was some of the current concerns that were brought up at a select board's meeting recently, and some other people I've spoken to. They were afraid this was going to go too far. I didn't have any problem originally with the streets and sidewalks. We do have a problem in town with some panhandling. And again, the same issue. They have the people who are involved in that type of activity have a constitutional right to do that. And we do get calls all the time because they end up in the streets interrupting flow of traffic. And we know that's going to happen. When we drive by and see these people involved in those activities, we know what's ultimately going to happen, but we can't do anything until it happens. So I thought originally this would help us in that fashion. But I think this will still give us, the language as amended by Mr. Dunn, give us the tools we need to take care of the problem. So I'm not bothered by the language change or offended in any way, shape, or form.
So with the time change, so 8 a.m. to 6, 8
Right.
p.m. to 6 a.m.,
Right.
that's a pretty wide range.
So, again, when we look at disturbing the peace statute, when we take criminal charges or take take enforcement action, you have to consider the location and the time of day. Kids yelling, screaming, playing loud music at Nelson Park at 4 in the afternoon is a lot different than they're doing it, at midnight, downtown. So I think the hour change will allow, businesses are still open at that time. People are coming and going, and they do tend to congregate after they meet, when they meet to go out to dinner or visit establishments downtown. And we're not looking to pounce right away. So I think I can live with this time issue. The issues we have, to be honest with you, typically occur after this time. It's usually like 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night that we're dealing with these issues. So I think this will work this will allow us to meet our goal, what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Just one more question.
Sure.
So how do you discern between what is actually loitering and personal persuasion?
I'm sorry?
So there's a personal persuasion provision in here.
Yeah, so
How does that work?
personal persuasion, that's a good question. So personal persuasion, I think, is people handing out leaflets. Say we have an election coming up, handing out pamphlets for their candidates or for a business in town. It's what the intent is here. Somebody using personal persuasion to try to hand out those flyers and whatnot, they're not intended on bothering people or citizens. They're there for a purpose, a legitimate purpose, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lally, I see your digital hand. The floor is yours.
So, one, I just want to let you know I'm here now, and I intend to vote on the motion. And secondly, do we have a motion on the table at this point, or are we still in discussion?
We actually were going to have a motion, but it became a description of an amendment. So we have an amendment on the floor. It has not been moved yet.
All right. Well, I would like to move the bylaw as amended by Mr. Dunn.
Okay, so we have a motion,
I would like to second that.
and Mr. Lawler has seconded that motion. I'm going to go to Mr. Zuccaroli. You did have your digital hand up, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just for clarifications, Chief, you have no problem with the amendments to the bylaw?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Any follow-up?
Thank you. Nope.
Okay.
No.
Call on your name, sir. Can you come up to the podium and identify yourself and your address? This is a comment from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich Serkey, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. Let me say that I've gotten a number of emails from constituents of mine who live in the Copper Cove apartments on Water Street at the intersection with Lothrop Street, complaining about youths gathering in the parking lot across the street on Water Street. And I've tried to direct them to the public officials involved. And I know that they've contributed toward the proposal of this bylaw. I have some concerns, however. The enforcement of the bylaw as written depends upon proving intent on the part of the person who's accused of loitering. Chief, how do you prove intent when you see somebody who's standing in a parking lot, speaking, playing loud music, causing a ruckus? How do you prove in a court of law that there's been the intent that's required under this bylaw? And what is the cost of enforcement if you bring charges against someone under this bylaw? Then you're going to have a policeman or a prosecutor spend time in the district court to prove that the bylaw has been violated by the perpetrator. That's a cost in terms of the time that the police officer is in court to prosecute and having the police officer who witnessed the loitering testify. To me, and I told this to the people who called me, I think the presence of police cars or the presence of police officers on foot or on bikes around where the person who's loitering is might have the desired effect of discouraging the continuation of this behavior without the necessity of having to go to court in order to enforce the behavior involved. I think that the presence of signs and the presence of police cars might have the effect without having to bring somebody to court on what might be a futile venture. And I say this as a retired attorney. I just don't see this as a good way of getting to the desired result. And I don't mean to minimize the problem caused by youth making mischief, but the cure may not be appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cirque, for your comments. I too would hope that anything that we do would be a deterrent and that it would not rise to the level of legal action. And I think maybe that's where we're trying to go with this.
It has to result in legal action. I mean, because if you're going to enforce the bylaw, the police officer is going to have to bring a charge against the person. And if there's no bylaw, the police officer can still talk to the person and try to discourage him and try to persuade him. But if you're going to enforce the action, you have to bring an action in the district court because of a violation of a town bylaw.
Okay, thank you again for your input. And do we have any other comments, discussion? We have somebody do you want to talk?
Sure.
Do you want to talk?
You want me to respond to Mr. Cirque's question?
Oh, sure. If you would like to respond to that.
Sure.
Please do.
So as far as intent goes, intent is three different types of content. And I don't want to speak out of turn. It's been a long time since I've had this class. But it's almost the analogy, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. We have enough experience out there that know that certain people at certain times of day in certain locations, their intent is not pure, if you will. Okay, so that's where I understand we can meet the intent standard of this bylaw. Now, as far as criminal enforcement, these are civil citations, no different than a speeding ticket that we issue thousands of times per year. The assertion that we can park a police officer, or police car at every one of these locations every day, it's impossible. Yes, we do on occasion have the free time to do that, and things are peaceful and calm while we're there. But human nature as it is, the minute we leave, the activity resumes. So right now, if we were to continue down the path we're on and how we handle things right now, where observation, surveillance, if you will, interviewing witnesses, making an arrest, transporting them to the station, booking this person in, watching this person with another officer until bail is set and made to be released. Then it goes to court. We have the prosecutor go through an arraignment or a hearing. The hours are lengthy and very, very costly. This is the least amount of manpower, if you will, least amount of intrusion, and it does not leave the individual, if they violate it, with a criminal offense with their record. Now, they have the right to an appeal. If they do get the citation and appeal it, that's at district court, and then we do have to send the officer to testify in that instance. But we're trying to solve a problem with the least inconvenience or the least police action as possible. Simple as that.
Thank you, Chief Flynn. I see Mr. Pizarro, your digital hand is up. The floor is yours.
You, through the chair, we're currently in discussion on the motion of the amendment, correct?
Correct. We are in discussion on the
I have a question for Mr. Dunn. Was the language asked of a commentary from town council? I mean, we just asked Chief Flynn, and he was fine with it from what I heard. But did we run this amendment past town council? So
yes, we did.
Great. Thank you.
Great question. Okay. Yes. Oh, Mr. Blitzer. Yeah, could you please identify yourself, although most of us know who you are?
Yeah,
but some
my
may
name is
not.
Charlie Blitzer. I'm a select board member, and I just want to simplify of how this came to us and how this came to fruition. The police have been getting multiple calls from Copper Cove, and Attorney Serkey, if this didn't pass tonight, I think you'd have a lot of irate clients if this didn't pass. They want this, and they need this. Their quality of life, they can't, from what we were told, they can't sit out on their porches and enjoy their condos and their water view because of the actions that's happening out in that parking lot. It's the loud music and what goes on there, and simply they don't belong there. Okay, they're not legally parked there. They're not going there to work in businesses. They're not going there to go to businesses and patronize businesses, and they're not parking there to leave their car and live there. They're simply there just to party. So it's because of the multiple calls that the chief has gotten, the police have gotten. Park Plymouth gets calls, and they just send them right to the police department because their answer to them is, we only enforce till 7 o'clock, and there's nothing we can do. You have to talk to the police about that. So your question is, how much does it cost the police? Every time they got to respond, it takes a police officer away from probably a more serious call, okay, right now. So and on top of that, the other problem, there's really 3 problems right now, and I'll get back to why the streets and sidewalks weren't that important right now. The behind East Bay Grill, if anybody's any weekend, get down there, especially in season, and you see the activities that go on down there. I lived there for 23 years, and I dealt with it. And believe me, it was unbelievable what I saw out there, and the disruption to the business. The cars up against the fence with the music blaring, the pot coming in. People thought that East Bay Grill served marijuana, okay, because it was so. And then you get, and then people, they actually really thought that. So that was a real problem. The other spot really came to, actually I've known about this because every select board meeting, I come out in the parking lot at 9:30, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, and I smell the marijuana out there, and you see all the kids in their cars in back, and there's one car in particular that rips around there, spinning out. You can't read his plate in his car. It's either an illegal car or it's illegal because of the tinting is illegal, and then he just takes off. And it came to fruition that the last 2 or 3 Saturdays ago, the neighbors there, one of the neighbors finally called me, and she said, "Charlie, it's awful what we have to deal with in that garage." And I knew exactly what she was talking about. These people, it's so bad. The engines, the loud engines, and her house shakes, and she's got PTSD. Miss McCormick, who was the one that brought it to my attention, and I actually, while I was on the phone with her, she called me. While we were on the phone, it happened again, and I called the chief, and he sent a cruiser down, and they cleared out that parking lot. So those are 3 areas that need help. The sidewalks, we haven't had any problems really on the streets and sidewalks, and that's the reason why we agreed to take that out. There was concerns about civil rights violations, but this bylaw needs to get passed because the police need a tool. We need to put signage up, no loitering. Police take notice. And I'm going to tell you, after a couple times, because it's the same group of kids that are doing this. This isn't like different people, it's the same groups. Once the word gets out that they can't do this, we'll be able to stop this. And everybody's worried about getting sued. It's going to be just like getting a traffic ticket. And if you want to appeal it, you appeal it to the district court. It goes before a clerk, and then if the clerk finds you responsible, you can appeal to a judge. It's not an arrestable offense right now. So you talk to your Copper Cove clients, Attorney Serkey, these residents need this. And, you know, we're worried about civil rights, but how about the rights of our residents and our taxpayers to be able to sit in their homes and enjoy quiet and peace and get a good night's sleep. So when you vote tonight on that, think about that, because this is so important, this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blitzer. And if you wait long enough tonight, you'll hear a couple of drive-bys down the street, which we hear every Wednesday night during our meeting. Yes, Mr. Dunn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to also urge everyone to vote for this. The original language that I saw, obviously I had a lot of concerns with, and I want to thank the chief and members of the Board of Selectmen and town council and town staff for working on this to get it to a point where I think we can solve most of the problem without encroaching on people's rights. So I just want to thank everyone that worked on this and appreciate all the assistance and everyone's agreement on this.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Any other further discussion? Yes, Ms. Tompkins, the floor is yours.
Just a comment that I appreciate the amendments to this article. I think it gets more specific to what the issue we're trying to deal with is, giving the time frame and being specific about parking lots. And I also appreciate in the second paragraph, violators of this bylaw may be subject to a fine. I think that opens up more of a relationship rather than going right to a violation, start with a warning and have a conversation. So I plan to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tompkins. Any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It's an amendment. The amendment is written. All of the members of this committee have in their possession that amendment. I will not read it again. It was read earlier, and that is what we're going to vote on. So we're going to start with Ms. Butler. Do you vote for or against this amendment?
I vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Cabana?
I vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, I don't think Mr. Young has come in. Okay, Ms. Zaro Abraham?
Yes.
And Mr. Zuccaroli?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have unanimous passage of Article 11 as amended by Mr. Dunn's amendment, and it passes unanimously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. So thank you again, Chief Flynn, for all your hard work, and I hope this is a deterrent that you're looking for. All right, so we're going to move on to Article 12, Special Legislation, Grant 2 New Liquor Licenses, Precincts 9 and 17 only. There's a lot of verbiage here. I'm not going to read it all. It is in your packets. And again, this is on the special for town meeting next month. So, would you, Mr. Blitzer, sorry, would you like
Charlie
to?
Blitzer, Select Board Member.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was a proponent of this special
Article.
home rule petition, excuse me. I've been getting a lot of calls about a need for liquor, some folks down in the Red Brook area, question about getting licenses. We didn't have any available. So what we had to do, I proposed a home rule petition. And it really is for two things. It's going to accomplish two things. And Ms. Downs, who spoke before earlier on the public comment, kind of solidified my arguments. I don't think she meant to, but It's about a need for the residents, a service for the residents, and it's about economic development. And I say that she said that they go to Wareham to 7-Eleven. Well, Wareham's not Plymouth, so we're losing revenue to Wareham and to Bourne because of the lack of access. And no disrespect to Ms. Downs, but maybe she doesn't mind driving 15 minutes to get her liquor at Pine Hills. But a lot of people, especially on a snowy night or a dark night, the roads are very dark. It's a long way. So after being requested to have these license down there, we looked. I talked with town council. I talked with Lisa Johnson from a license agent, and Lee Hartman, and we looked at the map of the town, and we looked at where all the liquor licenses are, and they're all along Route 3A, and they're in the North Plymouth, West Plymouth area, simply because that's where the population was 20 years ago. Well, the population is moving now southwest. Red Brook is an example of what's going on down there. It's exploding, but it's not just Red Brook. There's other neighborhoods down that way. My cousin lives in one of them. And he says to me, I go to Little Sandy Pond, I get my beer and wine. If I want liquor, I got to drive into Cedarville. Or he says, I can go to Wareham. It's quicker. So this is about two things: service for the residents and to keep tax revenue in Plymouth. And to say a couple things that I have to correct Ms. Downs about. Putting a liquor license, a package store, it's not going to hurt restaurants. This is an off-premise license. They cannot drink in the liquor stores. They take it home. The on-premise, the restaurants, that's where you drink alcohol on-premise. So the liquor license, package store licenses have nothing to do with restaurants. They do not affect restaurants. And the reason why, the other thing is, she said it's not going to help businesses. Well, I'm sorry, but Red Brook, if somebody did put a liquor store in that village, similar to what Pine Hill says, it's going to bring people in there, and they're going to be able to shop there and probably go to other shops. So I disagree with her that it's not going to help other businesses. So the intent, right now, there's only two places that I looked at that have retail right now. There's nothing in 16. In 16, I heard from some of the town meeting members that wouldn't support it if we didn't take 16 out of it. And there's only two licenses that we're going to have available, and quite frankly, there's nowhere in 16 that we could put one now anyway, because it's not there's no retail. So the only spots I could see it is the Little Sandy Pond, who already has a beer and wine license, and I know they want it. And in fact, they've been getting signatures to show that that people are requesting this. And the other spot right now, if somebody wanted to open a liquor store in Red Brook, there's nothing in there right now, and I don't even know if that'll ever happen. But those are the only real two places that this could happen. So that's why it's 17 and 9 in those precincts. And we designed this that they cannot be transferred out of those precincts. So we don't want to see somebody take a license from say Red Brook and then sell it 3 years from now and put a liquor store somewhere near a competing liquor store in West Plymouth or North Plymouth or Manamet. So that's the reason why this license are only for those precincts. So to me, it's a no-brainer to me. I think, I know there's residents down Red Brook. She doesn't want it, apparently, but there's people that really want this badly. And again, not to keep beating the dead horse. It's service to our residents, and it's economic development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. And I have a question for you, Mr. Bletzer. Can you explain there's a limited number of liquor licenses for the town. How does that work?
So it goes by population, but Plymouth is a unique town. We're 106 square miles. So we are now starting to spread out. So it's not like, our population, Southwest, if you look at the map, and we will have one available when it gets presented at town meeting, and you can see where the licenses are, where they're clustered. And then you see this big areas. And, and I heard from, one of the precincts that said, well, there's nothing there. But we don't know. At first, I wanted to do more than two, ask for more than two, because it's a lot of work to get this done. But I was told that you just go for two for now. But I was thinking for the future. We don't know, what's going to happen down towards the Wareham-Bourne line, what kind of developments. So, but if we need it 5-10 years from now, I guess we can just go back and try and do this again. But for right now, I can tell you, if we do get the two licenses, if the state allows it, because it has to get passed by them, if it gets through town meeting, those two licenses, I know the Little Sandy Pond Campground is definitely ready, and hopefully somebody in Red Brook or somewhere in that area, in Red Brook, actually, somebody in that village, because I really think a liquor store is a big part. Look Long Ridge does in Pine Hills. It's very important to the Pine Hills community. So,
Great.
Any other questions?
I am going to turn the floor over to Mr. Howard. I see your digital hand, and you're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Blitzer. I had heard that the town of Plymouth has exceeded our number of permitted liquor licenses by 2.
You're correct.
Is that correct?
You're correct.
And does the select board plan on correcting that issue?
We're asking for 2 more with this.
No, I understand that, but we're already over by 2, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So will the select board correct that
Yes.
error?
The town manager, I will have to talk to the town manager.
But the select board issues licenses, isn't that correct?
Yes, if we get these 2 additional licenses.
But shouldn't we correct the tally first before we ask for more?
I'd have to get back with you on that question. I'm not gonna.
It sounds to me like the select board's made an error that should be corrected before this goes forward. Thank you.
We have the licenses, and they're not going to take those licenses away. So we're asking for an additional 2 over the 2, and actually that's what we're doing. So we're asking for 2 additional over what we already have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so it sounds like you're asking for 4.
2.
The 2 from before that.
We already have the licenses. We have. We already have. The state has given them to us. So to say, I think we're over by the number that's allotted, but we have them. So and we've had them for a while. So they're not going to take them away. And again, if I had the town manager right here, he could probably clarify that. But we're asking for 2, and this has gone through legal counsel. I've talked to legal counsel about this. They have talked to the ABC. Lisa Johnson has talked to the ABC about this, and they're the one that actually guided us to do this home rule petition.
Okay.
We've got guidance from other towns that have done the same thing too. So.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Cabana. I see your digital hand, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Mr. Blitzer. Do you envision 1 license in each of the 2 precincts in question, or would it be 2 in number 9 and 0 in 17, or vice versa?
That's a good question. We have 2 if we get the 2 licenses, they will only be available in precinct 9 or precinct 17. If there's 2 viable applications in 9 or 2 in 17, they could go to the same precinct, yes.
But doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of it? Why wouldn't you make it specific, one in each precinct, if you're concerned about serving the constituency?
We would have to look at where those locations are. If you look at 17 and 9, certain parts of 17 and 9 are very close. So we would have to look. Now, right now, if the two available spots would be one in Red Brook and one in Little Sandy Pond. If those applicants were viable, I'm sure that I know I would grant it to those two areas.
Okay, I'm sorry, but that logic doesn't run for me. So, thank you for answering my question.
We don't have to, just because we don't have to issue these licenses.
Well, I know, but your premise was that you wanted to, you brought it up for two precincts. And now you're saying, well, one precinct may get two and the other one get none. Why wouldn't you make a 1 and 1?
Because it depends on the location. 17 is a pretty big precinct. If in 9 is close to 17 in certain parts, 17. So I can't. It depend where the location is in those precincts. So we're not limited. We're just saying 2 licenses. At first, it was going to be 16, 17, and 9. 2 precincts available. 2 licenses available for those 3 precincts. So it's.
Thank you.
Can I turn this to Mr. Canty about the licenses?
Okay, I will recognize Mr. Canty coming in as the cleanup hitter here.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Neerman. I appreciate it. It's good to be before you guys again. So I'm coming in at a prior obligation, so apologize for arriving in the middle of this. So this article is obviously to ask for special legislation from the Commonwealth to allow for 2 additional licenses that would be perpetually geographically limited to precincts 9 and 17. The reasons for that is 9 and 17 presently have 2 locuses where such licenses could be issued, but they will be perpetually limited to these geographic meets and bounds. So every 10 years, the precincts are redrawn. But this would restrict it to the current drawings of precincts 9 and 17 forever. So obviously there's right now only 2 areas where they're properly zoned where they could have them. That's Red Brook, and then there's Little Sandy Pond could have them. Little Sandy Pond currently does have a partial liquor license for malt and wine, beer and wine, but they don't have a full liquor license. And
the question was, do they have to go 1 to each, or can you put 2 in one?
Sure. So in regards to the question that I didn't hear and was just reminded, they're not required to be 1 in 1 precinct. So right now there's 2 areas that could have them in one in either of those 2 precincts. So it's likely, we anticipate, that somebody in Red Brook will want one and that Little Sandy Pond may want one. No applicant is guaranteed to receive a liquor license. They would be vetted in the normal course. They would have to meet certain requirements. They'd have to pay fees, all of that. So it's potential that 2 of them could go to, say, Red Brook because there's enough space there with the zoning that could happen. We don't anticipate that that's going to happen. But because these are geographically bound to these meets and bounds in perpetuity, if zoning changes 20, 30, 80 years from now in a way where different areas are zoned where they could have a liquor store, then that license could be transferred within the current meets and bounds of 9 and 17, but not outside of those meets and bounds. And that's because there's a gap in service in the bottom corner of the community. If you look at a map of where liquor stores presently are, that we don't have liquor stores down in this particular area, which means that people in that area are likely driving to other communities to purchase their alcohol sales. And we believe that there would be a benefit in retaining that business in Plymouth. Mr. Bletzer and I are in favor of economic development in the town, in a variety of forms. We want good, high-paying jobs. We want middle-skill jobs. We want more retail-type jobs as well where they make sense. This is something that if we create the licenses, the jobs will come. It's an easy, quick fix as opposed to getting something like the Cisco plant in Plimpton to be able to open up in the industrial park here is a more complicated and significant ball of wax, okay? So what we're looking to do with this is to create some economic development in this area of town, to bring some revenue in, to create some new businesses there, to offset our commercial, to increase our commercial tax base and offset the residential tax base with just the stroke of a pen. Much easier than the more complicated things.
The other question, Selectman Canty, was Mr. Howard had a question about we're already 2 licenses over our allotment. And so he said, what are we going to do about that? I said, we're asking for 2 more. So he wants to know if we're going to correct that.
So the additional licenses that we already have are because the ABCC made a mistake a number of years ago. So we have those licenses. We're not going to lose those licenses. We're petitioning for 2 additional licenses. The metrics demonstrate that even though we are over by population in terms of our current licenses, that there's still sufficient demand in the community, not only from the residents, but also from the tourists and the visitors that we have and people from neighboring communities that are going to downtown businesses for other things and are buying alcohol on their way back, for example, to their home in their other community. So this would be to petition the general court for 2 further licenses. It would be up to the general court to take that up and pass that along. But it would not affect the pre-existing additional licenses that we already have. It's asking for additional further licenses. And again, there is that gap in service. Despite the fact that we're over our number of licenses per population, the way that they are currently laid out is clustered in the northeast sector of town, and it thins out from there. Because historically, that's where Plymouth started from. I mean, if Dale Weber was here, he'd tell you that Precinct 3 is where everything began, right? So everything came from there and moved out, and it's moving out slowly but surely into the other areas of our community, and we're looking to bring some service down to those areas where people, for example, Red Brook, which 17 years ago didn't exist, and now is a growing community that I believe this committee has heard a lot from recently. So, we have a lot of people moving into a variety of different places in town, and we are looking to provide them with the services that they require down there and to offset the residential tax base burden while we're there.
Okay, thank you for one moment. Thank you, Mr. Canty, for that detailed explanation. I'm going to go back to Mr. Howard and Mr. Cabana to see if your questions have been answered to your satisfaction.
Yes, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cabana.
Yes, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Now I'm going to go to Mr. Pizarro. Your digital hand is up, and the floor is yours.
Through the chair, thank you. Thank you, Selectman Blitzer and Selectman Canty, for your explanations and answering the questions tonight. I personally have a economic worldview that operates under the umbrella of open markets, right? But I do understand that, unfettered economic development is probably not the best for any community. And I think some of the metrics around the number of liquor licenses a community has, the state has, put some guardrails around that. So today, as I heard, we're already 2 over by our population. We're going to ask for 2 more. So that's what I heard. The second thing is there's some protectionist pieces to the article where you're only limiting it to either the 2 precincts, 9 and 17, and you can't transfer them. So I'm going to flip that over on its head, because if population is moving towards those precinct areas, can existing liquor licenses or package stores move to precinct 17 and 9? Is there a market driver that's causing an opportunity for those liquor, those vendors to say, hey, you know what? There's opportunity there. Let's see if I can move it. Is there anything holding back any of those existing liquor stores from moving from where the population started and now moving towards the southwest?
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Pizarro. It's a good question. So the thinking with these particular licenses being geographically limited to 9 and 17 is to prevent them from being transferred to, say, like a Market Basket or a Walmart, where if Walmart were to buy, say, a Little Sandy Pond were to apply for it, get granted it, and then sell that license to Walmart, Walmart could push out other small town mom and pop liquor stores in a way, because they can beat anybody on price all day long. That's their business model, and they're known for ruining mom and pop businesses across the nation. So that's the purpose for this geographic restriction, is preventing these licenses being created for a gap in service down there from being relocated elsewhere. But as I alluded to earlier, the market forces are demonstrating that where licenses currently are held in the northern more parts of town, the eastern and northern parts of town, there is sufficient demand there that while a license currently in those areas could be transferred to 9 and 17, that's correct, there's not a good enough justification for a business that is doing good business where they are to pick up roots and go to another location. So that's why instead of asking or looking for or waiting for, more accurately, an existing business to pick up their roots and transfer their license down to these areas, instead the Select Board is looking to acquire 2 additional licenses because if you provide them, the liquor stores will come, as opposed to we do not have the evidence that they are going to uproot, because they're currently, if you're making good money where you currently are, there's no real good reason for you to uproot and go down somewhere else where you may do well, but why make that risk and that risky choice if you've already got a good, viable business up there? Which, again, the market forces are demonstrating that even though we are over our number of liquor stores, there's still sufficient demand to keep all of them in good, healthy business where they currently are affixed and located. Any follow-up questions, Mr. Pizarro? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Selectman Canty, for that answer. I do have one follow-up question, and I don't expect you to have an answer, but what is when you say that there's demand, what's the expected revenue from something like that on an average basis to the town?
To the town or to the business?
To the town. I mean, we get taxes from the 60-plus licenses now, so each liquor store makes something, right?
Right. Well, there's a variety of taxes that liquor stores pay to state, and they pay state taxes, they pay town taxes, they pay property taxes on the parcel that they're on. The incentive for having more commercial development is that, unlike a residence which sends kids to school, liquor stores don't do that, and that's the biggest cost driver. It costs about like $24,000 to send a child to school. So if you have a nuclear family, 2.5 kids, you're looking at about $62,500 in expenses. That's if one of them is a half child. So there's a significant amount of money being spent providing services to residential property owners. So the primary way, although they would pay a license fee, they'd pay a renewal fee every year. Those are comparatively relatively small. Instead, they would be providing property tax revenue to the community, and they would also be providing, obviously, jobs to hopefully Plymouth residents or local area residents, as well as the business owners themselves likely having residences in the town of Plymouth.
I'd just like to add, and as the population increases down that part of Plymouth, the revenue will increase, and we won't be losing revenues to Wareham and Bourne. So the tax revenues will increase as the population grows down there.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions before I go to Mr. Surkey? Could you please step to the podium?
Rich Cirque, Precinct 2. Mr. Bletzer said that he's gotten a lot of requests or calls in favor of this special legislation to add these 2 licenses. When the issue of banning nips in the town of Plymouth was before the town meeting, we found that many of the wishes that were imputed to the electorate were gathered by clipboards on the counters of existing liquor stores. And I asked the following question: did the calls that Mr. Bletzer received come from the owners of properties that would seek the licenses, or did they come from constituents who would be consumers? I know it's hard to answer that question, but to simply say that I've gotten a lot of calls may not reflect the wishes of the consumer more than the desires of the property owner. Secondly, with respect to Redbrook, that property, the land there is owned by the A.D. Makepeace Company. And full disclosure, before my retirement 5 years ago, I represented the A.D. Makepeace Company. But my question is, and I don't know the answer to it, has the Makepeace Company weighed in on whether or not it's interested in having a package store on its property? Because that would be a prerequisite. If it would be on land owned by the A.D. Makepeace Company, they would need to weigh in on whether they would lease property for purposes of use as a package store. With respect to Mr. Howard's question, the town has already issued 2 more licenses than it should have. And we've heard that it was attributable to an error by the ABCC. How do we convince the ABCC when it's asked to approve the issuance of 2 more licenses that it should do so when apparently it erred in issuing the existing 2 that are over the limit? How do you ask the ABCC to do that? They've already given the consumer, metaphorically speaking, a dessert. And now somebody's asking for a second dessert, the consumer in that metaphor being the town of Plymouth. And finally, with respect to property tax revenue, I have to take issue with something Mr. Canty said. The owners of these package stores presumably would be lessees from the property owner. And unless the lease provided that the package store would pay a portion of the tax bill would go to the landowner. It would not go to the lessee of a package store. So those were just the points I wanted to raise. I consider this request less as reflecting the wishes of the consumers and more the wishes of either existing beer and wine licensees like Sandy Pond or Redbrook, ADM in the case of Redbrook.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cirque, and I can tell there are a couple of eager people ready to answer. Mr. Bletzer, could you answer the first question about where those comments are coming from?
Okay. Mr. Cirque, I'm going to have to, I should have brought a pen and paper to write down all your questions because, anyway, the first question, the people I talk to are consumers that own homes in that area. That's who I talk to, consumers that own homes. Some of them in the neighborhoods outside of Redbrook, but a very active member of the town meeting in Redbrook is all for this. The second question, does A.D. Makepeace? I talked to Dan Gorsiger, and he actually told me that he got inquiries from somebody that would like to put a liquor store, who was asking about putting a liquor store in Redbrook. And I said, well, we're going to be doing this home rule petition. If it passes, there may be a license available. So they want that. And just similar to what they did at Pine Hills with Long Ridge. It's a big part of that community. What was your other question, Richard? Sorry. Then let's start with a nip ban. You were talking about the nip ban, about...
I was just asking how you expect the ABCC
The ABC
to approve number 13 and number 14 when they've already issued two more.
The ABC, we've been talking to council, and the ABC is guiding us on what we're doing. So the ABC is aware of what we're trying to do. And what else? You had 4 or 5 questions. I know he's got one, but yeah, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. In terms of the ABCC, they're a regulatory body, so this is petitioning the general court. So the general court would be granting the licenses, so the ABCC would be in a position where they would be complying with state legislation. So it's not something that we need to ask the ABCC about. It's something that the general court would be imposing if the special legislation were to be allowed. Procedurally, the ABCC is a regulatory body, not a legislator.
Would these licenses be issued by the ABCC rather than the Board of Selectmen?
They'd be regulated by the ABCC, but they would be issued pursuant to all licenses by the licensing authority, which would be the select board in the present form of government.
And then the ABCC has to approve the issuance.
Correct. So the reason that the ABCC, the other licenses, my understanding, it was before my time, but the reason that we have additional licenses was that others were denied licenses at a time, and they appealed, and then they were granted those licenses, which went over the count, but then it was sort of grandfathered in, okay? So the other, in terms of, you mentioned the issue with who's going to be paying that property tax bill. So I think, I agree with you. I don't think we disagree on that. I think, though, it's a distinction without a difference, because a commercial property is property that you derive revenue from rent. Generally is a permissible commercial use. So if you own a building that you're leasing to someone that has a liquor store, it's still a commercial property. They're still not sending that liquor store, whether it's owner-owned or leased, is still not sending children to school and consuming the other services that we're talking about. So it's still a net positive on the tax rate, and it helps ease the burden on residential taxpayers. And then we have received a number of comments, as Mr. Bletzer said, in regards to demand in these areas from residents as well as prospective, I believe, from prospective people that may apply for the licenses. But there's certainly been constituents down there that are interested in having liquor stores within the metes and bounds of those particular precincts, because they are in a situation where they're either driving longer distances within Plymouth or driving outside the bounds of Plymouth in order to get their business done. Did you have further questions, Mr. Serkey?
One thing to add, too. One last thing, too. Little Sandy Pond Campground. That's a campground. People go there to camp. They pull in with their trailers. They have all their supplies, and they don't want to have to leave the campground. So they can get beer and wine, and there's been all kinds of requests from those folks. Why can't we get liquor? For them to get liquor, they have to drive either to Wareham or they're going to drive into Cedarville. So there's a big demand in season for the campers.
Mr. Serkey.
I was just wondering whether the issue was prompted by thirsty consumers or whether it was prompted by enterprising landlords or property owners. That was the purpose of my question.
And I think that was answered,
Yeah.
hopefully to your satisfaction. Okay, Mr. Cabana, I see your digital hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have essentially 2 questions, and I'm not sure if Mr. Canty or Mr. Bletzer is the best person to answer them, but I'll let them decide that. First of all, wasn't there a recent transfer of a license to Stoll's Cafe in Manamet, and where did that license come from?
That's a on-premise liquor license. That's different than the off-premise package store licenses. We have,
Okay, so
we have, there's not a, we have plenty of, still have plenty of those licenses available.
okay, thank you for that. And do you have an estimate of the economic value that would be generated by establishing these two licenses? I mean, a ballpark figure, is it $10,000 a year, 50,000, 100,000?
I don't have that. I could just say that the business, that if a business opens in Red Brook, whatever revenue, that's new revenue coming there. And as far as the Little Sandy, I'd have to see what happens next year and see what his numbers are. I couldn't give that to you right now. And I don't think, quite frankly, I don't know if I was in business. I don't think I'd tell you right now.
Well, I mean, you're both of you are making a case.
I could guess. I could throw a number, but I'd be guessing. So
both of you are advocating that you're going to
Mr.
add
Cabana,
commercial.
I would say that the value of a liquor license is at least a few $100,000 a year. Could be more in terms of the economic, in the revenue that a liquor license for all off premises is for all liquor is generating. So it could go upwards from there, but you're talking at least a few $100,000 every year of revenue that business is bringing in. Now, not all of that is going to be coming to the town in terms of direct taxes, things of that nature, but that's the type of revenue that these types of businesses are generating at a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Zuccaroli, I see your digital hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We've heard a lot of discussion about this. I think that I kind of feel like we've heard sufficient discussion and presentation on this, so I'd like to move the question.
Okay, I would like to call one public comment. Ms. Edelman has been very patient. I'd like to put the floor to you before we entertain a motion.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. I had a question. We learned during the NIP band discussion that any new liquor store in Boston agreed not to sell nips. Would that be the case for these two new licenses? And the other, it's a statement, not a question. I sent 5 children through the Plymouth Public Schools, and I resent the fact that liquor stores, the revenue they would produce, is valued more than bringing up children through the school system. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Canty, would you like to answer the question?
Sure, I'd love to answer that. So I was in favor of upholding the ban of nips. So I helped on that issue. Mr. Bletzer was on the other side of that particular issue. So in Boston, new licenses are being restricted in that way, but there is I do not believe that the select board would be looking to restrict these new licenses. Now, the question was, could that happen? Yeah, it could. I don't think that this select board or a future select board is likely to handicap specific businesses. I think in fairness, whether we sell nips or we don't sell nips should be a town-wide issue, not a precinct by precinct type issue. So I would anticipate that although the answer to the question would be yes, it could be so restricted if the issuing authority wanted to do so, I do not anticipate that this or any future select board reviewing these licenses is likely to restrict things in that way. If other liquor stores in Plymouth have the ability to sell nips, it makes sense that these stores should also have the ability to sell nips.
And Pat, I'd just like to add to that it went to the voters, and the voters voted not to ban nips. So the voters were in favor of having nips in the stores. So why would we restrict it if that's what the voters want? And the second thing is, some good came out of that campaign. It was very controversial a little bit, but right now, starting in April, the liquor stores they've gotten together and they're going to do cleanups. Each store is going to clean up their neighborhood. They're going to be responsible for cleaning their neighborhoods up. So they've listened to, the problems that the NIPS supposedly have caused. And I'm going to be part of that cleanup too, because I want to see firsthand. And I'm also going to be involved in that May cleanup that Ken Stone is going to be running too. But the voters voted for it, and so we're not going to restrict the liquor stores to not sell NIPS.
Ms. Edelman, would you like a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Howard, I see your digital hand. The floor is
I
yours.
second the motion of Mr. Zuccarelli.
Thank you. So we have a first from Mrs. Zuccarelli. We have a second from Mr. Howard to approve Article 12. Do we have any discussion? We do. And we're going to go to Mr. Green. The floor is yours.
Sure. So I'm in favor of this motion. I think one of the benefits of this that hasn't really been discussed, or maybe partially has been, is that if a liquor store is closer to where people are, driving to get their liquor, they don't have to drive as far and drink their nips while they drive. So it's an added plus.
They can leave them in other people's neighborhoods now. Okay. Any other pluses that Mr. Lawler? Can you top that? Did you want the floor? No. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to Mr. Wright and then Mr. Zuccarelli.
So, Mr. Sergey, I appreciate the information you presented tonight. It was, I'm not going to say it was eye-opening, but this type of decision needs information. I'm not sure I really heard information that would be consistent with approving something like this. Mr. Canty, Mr. Blitzer, I appreciate you coming in and giving us input on why we want to do something like that. But to make a decision like that, I would want, more precise data. Coming in here and saying there's a lot of consumers want this, I would assume on the other side there's a lot of people that wouldn't want it for the specific problems that we just talked about earlier with loitering and other things that happen when you present a liquor license to someone. The other side of that too is I'm still not sure about the demand. You say there's a specific demand, and I know when you want a liquor license, it brings in probably demand. But you haven't substantiated what that demand looks like. Saying a lot of people want it is not data to me. It means it's a specific opinion to you.
Mr. Chairman, and with all respect to Mr. Wright, we are in discussion, not with closed questioning of this issue.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, we're in discussion amongst ourselves. We're not in questioning of...
Yeah, I appreciate that note, but I wanted to ask a couple more questions, which I think I have the right to do, correct? No?
I will grant you a question, but we really are in discussion
I'm complete.
At this point. Okay. Mr. Zuccarelli, we are in discussion, and you have the floor.
Thank you. I intend on supporting this article. I see nothing wrong with competition among various liquor stores. I live in Precinct 1. There are 3 liquor stores that are in walking distance of where my home is. All of them service a different, they serve to a different group of clientele. One liquor store has a little bit more high end, another one is a little more basic, and the other is somewhere in between. They're all good businesses and they provide a lot for the community. I think competition is good. So I don't see any problem with that. And finally, we are talking about liquor stores. Cash and carry. Nobody is going to be sitting out on the steps drinking liquor. This is not, we're not talking about an outdoor venue. We're talking about a cash and carry operation. So I would support this article.
Thank you, Mr. Zuccaroli. Mr. Dunn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also be supporting this article, and I think that it's important to note here that just because we get approved to get 2 more licenses doesn't mean we're getting 2 new stores right away. If the demand's not there, the businesses won't exist, and if they do open, then they'll close. So getting 2 licenses doesn't necessarily mean that we'll immediately have 2 new businesses, but I think having grown up in South Plymouth and been in that area for a long time, there is really a desert there that we don't have these stores in that area. And I think that if there are residents that would like it, and if there are businesses that believe there's a demand to make it happen, then I think we should have those licenses. And if the demand isn't there, then those businesses will close.
And I imagine those businesses will do the analysis before they put the investment in. So I appreciate those comments. Any other further comments? Yes. Ms. Tompkins, the floor is yours.
I'm in agreement with this with Mr. Dunn. I'm actually comparing our precinct map to, I Googled Town of Plymouth liquor stores, and he's completely accurate, where we have a big cluster in the north area, and there's much lacking in the south area. Also, we have the Ponds of Plymouth development in South Plymouth as well, and I would love to see the campgrounds be able to advance their license for more business. And I do believe that the demand is there, and to more evenly distribute consumers' choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tompkins. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you,
Floor
Mr.
is yours.
Chairman. I also will be supporting this. It's all about business in Plymouth, and it's all about convenience to our townspeople. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, so we are voting to approve or recommend to approve Article 12, the granting of liquor licenses. I will not read through the entire article. We have pretty much beaten that to a pulp. So, Ms. Butler, how do you vote on Article 12?
Yes.
Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
No.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
No.
And Ms. Zaro Abraham?
Yes.
And Mr. Zuccaroli?
Yes.
Okay, so Article 12, I should say the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends to town meeting to approve Article 12 with a vote of 10 votes for, 2 votes against, and 0 abstentions. So I thank you, gentlemen. I thank you, Mr. Serkey, for your continued interest in bringing to light issues in the town. So your lawyering past continues into your future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Advisory and Finance Committee.
Thank you.
And thank you. I didn't realize I was going to be presented. I would have dressed more appropriately.
Oh, you're dressed totally appropriately for my committee. That's for sure. It's Mr. Canty that's a little suspect. Fashionably is the key word there. All right. Thank you. Any new, old, other business? No, hearing and seeing none. Any further public comment? I see a few names on, and I see people waving. Okay, Mr. Graveline, could you please identify yourself and your address, and the floor will be yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Keith Gravelin, 4 River Birch Way. I live in the Red Brook community. I don't have a particular issue with the licensing being issued. It certainly seems like this has been played out where Red Brook is going to get one of these. As you guys vetted the senior housing project, I just want to get it on record that this developer tends to just put buildings where they feel they should just put them to save money and not take interest from the residents. So my biggest fear is location of this liquor store. So that will be something that the residents will have to address with the developer if they do get a license and get somebody to come in here. So I just think that would be, for the resident standpoint, where they put this liquor store could be a big impact on down in our area where we have our central village area. So that's all I just wanted to get on the record.
Thank you very much. And it looks like, Mr. Graveling, you have just appointed yourself as the key person for that committee of location of liquor store in Red Brook. Accepted. Any other public input, comments, complaints, compliments? 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 Okay. Let's entertain a motion to adjourn. And could I get a motion? Anybody?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. A second?
Seconded, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Appreciate that. All right. Any discussion on adjourning? Okay, Ms. Butler, how do you vote on adjourning?
I vote first on the compliment and second on the adjourning.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. Cabana?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lally?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Pizarro?
Yes.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Zaro Abraham?
Yes.
And Mr. Zuccaroli?
Yes.
And it is unanimous. The Advisory and Finance Committee meeting is adjourned at 8:31 p.m. on the 6th of March.